Lindsey Graham, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, starting to talk about discredited conspiracy theories about Ukraine. I find this very interesting because yesterday you couldn't get a straight answer from 3 Congress people who kept going back to CrowdStrike and a Ukrainian conspiracy theory that had been discredited months ago.
Yeah, Joe, that was really stunning. I had a simple question, which was, what is the corruption that President Trump was policing from May when the Department of Defense certified those funds and said Ukraine met all corruption standards? And September, when 3 days after Congress started investigating him, all of a sudden he released the aid. We went around in circles. It was an 11-minute exchange, and frankly, all of the other media who were there at that stakeout joined in with me in trying to get an answer. We walked away from it having no other answer other than that the president was tracking Burisma and the Bidens. And to your previously well-placed skepticism about this, Joe, despite those polls, Mitch McConnell made those comments that he didn't have the votes yet in the midst of a meeting where he was arm-twisting people to get the votes. And after that meeting, our own Leanne Caldwell spoke with one of those senators, Senator Pat Roberts, who said he was, quote, feeling good about the fact that they probably did have the votes to stop the witnesses. So keep in mind that some fundamental things have not changed here, which are that a lot of those vulnerable Republicans, like Thom Tillis, like Martha McSally, like Cory Gardner, have primary opponents waiting in the wings, waiting to pounce. So you really come back to that same small, narrow group of 3 that we're watching. And only 2 of them have looked like they're sure on this, which is Collins and Romney. Murkowski did make those comments saying she was curious about what Bolton had to say before that arm-twisting meeting. After the arm-twisting meeting, we all chased her down to the bowels of the Capitol and onto the train where she refused to comment. So it's still very much unclear whether those votes are going to be there for the witnesses. And even if they do get the votes for the witnesses, Joe, keep in mind that it could be a protracted process, as there's a lot of ambiguity right now over what the president will do to try to block John Bolton, and that in the end, there's almost no doubt here that the president would be acquitted.
You know, Michael Steele, when I was a very young boy growing up in the suburbs of Atlanta, I would sit in front of the TV set every morning while my mother was still sleeping, and I'd watch a show called Romper Room.
Oh, yeah.
And there'd be this magic ball that the host would look into, and they would say, I see Johnny,
yeah,
and I see Sam,
yeah,
and I see Joey. And I'm like, oh, my God, she sees me. They say, of course, say the most general names in the world. But anyway, but we can do this for Republicans right now, you and me. We can look into the crystal ball,
yep,
and we can see the future. And the future looks like this. 75% of Americans think that Donald Trump it needs the impeachment trial needs more witnesses. A majority believe he abused the power of his office. A majority believe, I mean, all of that said, all the polls say a majority of Americans think this guy abused the powers of the offices and obstructed justice, obstructed investigation into his own impeachment trial. But we look in that crystal ball for Cory Gardner, for Martha McSally, for Thom Tillis, for everybody in these swing states. John Bolton, this information, whether it comes out tightly confined in a Senate trial, or whether it just gets blown out all over the airwaves over the next 2 or 3 months, that information is going to come out, which is going to include a lot of incriminating information about Donald Trump, which is going to lead to more incriminating information about Donald Trump, which is going to lead to an avalanche of incriminating information about Donald Trump. This morning, we're, of course, reading about attempts of Donald Trump to kill investigations into a corrupt Turkish bank and possibly even into Chinese banks, not banks, but Chinese entities for his own personal financial reasons.
Well, I think
these people are trying to kill this investigation now. Why don't we look into the crystal ball? How bad does this look for them the last week of the election when we know so much more then than we know now? And they're the ones who voted to stop Americans from learning the truth about Donald Trump?
Well, they're willing to take that risk because, again, these are players who play a short game. They're not playing the long game into November. And what their opponents, who are going to be well-financed, the Democrats are already outpacing Republicans in that regard at the congressional level and senatorial level. You have McConnell and others already, clanging the box on, hey, you got to get the fundraising going. So that's number one. Number two, you're going to have a narrative problem in the fall when your opponents, who are well-financed, again, are putting up ads that remind the voters that at a critical juncture, when you could have asked for more witnesses, where you could have helped the country resolve this in a way that we now see all the facts and know all the facts, you didn't. But they're more interested in the short game. You touched on a very important point, Joe, and that is they're looking to their right and they're seeing, I've got someone waiting in the wings who will pounce on me that Donald Trump could potentially support. When it comes to the question of corruption, I think the president gives us all we need to know when he says to his folks, hey, why do we need this Foreign Corrupt Practices Act? Why can't we bribe people? Why can't American businesses bribe foreign governments to get what they want? So the narrative is set, and these guys are buying into the narrative of a man who has no regard for any of this stuff.
So former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says he believes John Bolton's reported account of the Ukraine saga should be heard. Speaking to a crowd in Florida on Monday, General Kelly commented on what Bolton reportedly reveals in his forthcoming book, that President Trump told Bolton that releasing military aid to Ukraine hinged on whether the country investigated the president's political rivals, including, of course, Joe Biden. According to the Sarasota Herald Tribune, Kelly asserted this, quote, if John Bolton says that in the book, I believe John Bolton, adding, quote, every single time I was with him, he always gave the president the unvarnished truth. Amid the growing calls for Bolton to testify at the impeachment trial, Kelly said this, I think if there are people that could contribute to this, either innocence or guilt, I think they should be heard. I think some of the conversations seemed to me to be very inappropriate, but I wasn't there. Speaking to Bolton's character, the retired four-star Marine Corps general added, quote, John's an honest guy. He's a man of integrity and great character. So, Mike Barnicle, remember back in October when John Kelly warned Trump that if he hired a yes man to be his chief of staff, he would be impeached. He was right about that. He believes John Bolton should sit as a witness at this trial.
Yeah, well, and who wouldn't go along with what General Kelly said yesterday? My problem with General Kelly, it's not a real problem and it doesn't matter that it's my problem, is General Kelly, General Mattis, where are they? They know more than anybody that's testified, I think, probably before the impeachment committee. Where are they? And, this whole thing is coming down this week, I think, from what you hear, from talking to sitting United States senators, to a conclusion that maybe by the end of this week, the President of the United States will be acquitted in the United States Senate. He'll be acquitted by the end of this week. And, Joe, Romper Room is one thing, but there's a separate universe just as fictitious as Romper Room, and it's called Mitch McConnell's United States Senate. I believe, from what I've been told, that he does have the votes to end this thing, and he wants to end this thing. So we could be going to Iowa over the weekend with the President of the United States having been acquitted.
Well, but Jonathan Lemire, again, the president, if he is acquitted, and if these Republicans actually obstruct the investigation and vote against transparency and vote against the truth getting out, they're going to be voting against the overwhelming majority of Americans. Again, in Trump world, you never think about tomorrow. In Trump world, there never are consequences. In McSally world, she's already seen, there are consequences. You lose elections. Cory Gardner, he's seeing that too. He's getting pounded right now in the polls. He's upside down, his favorabilities. Joni Ernst blathered a couple of days ago on television, said something really stupid. She used her outside voice when she should have kept her thoughts inside, and revealed actually that everything that she is doing in this political conspiracy with Donald Trump, where she's just parroting every word that Donald Trump wants her to say, just proves that this whole exercise has been to slander Joe Biden, to attack Joe Biden. So I just wonder if these senators really have convinced themselves that they can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it.